Wheelchairs belong behind closed doors, not in public spaces. The man's words sliced through the diner like a razor-sharp insult. Then, without warning, one of them kicked her wheelchair, sending her crashing to the ground, her bag and contents strewn across the tile. But half an hour later, a military Humvee skidded to a stop outside. 3 Marines stepped out and entered. They didn't speak, but their focused eyes silenced every voice in the building. "Hi everyone, welcome to Echo Tales." Ever seen shame flip into respect right before your eyes? Comment respect. If you believe dignity always finds its way back. Linda Rowe sat in her usual booth, quiet as ever, in Montana's Welcome Home diner. Her scarred hands rested calmly in her lap. At 48, the former Marine Staff Sergeant bore the weight of war on her body and in her mind. An IED in Afghanistan had taken her left leg, but the emotional wounds ran deeper than any scar. Sunlight filtered through dusty windows, drawing golden lines across the worn floorboards. She shifted her prosthetic under her faded jeans, gritting her teeth against phantom pain. Still, she worked part-time, clinging to the rhythm of routine that kept the shadows at bay. She valued the silence between shifts, when the diner felt like a sanctuary. The owner, Mike, hadn't blinked when he hired her, just a solid handshake between 2 veterans. He never asked about her leg. He didn't pity her. He just respected her. That day's quiet shattered when the bell over the door shrieked. 4 loud, swaggering men barged in, reeking of liquor and arrogance. Their laughter was coarse, disruptive. Linda sat straighter. She recognized their leader instantly, Jack Winters, a dishonorably discharged Army private. He'd made a name locally for targeting people he viewed as weak. "Well, what do we have here?" Jack bellowed, nudging his crew. "It's the half-soldier in the spinny chair." Linda kept her gaze down, folding napkins with slow, deliberate care. 18 years of service had taught her discipline and how to pick her battles. This one wasn't worth her dignity. "Didn't think they let the crippled handle food," Jack sneered, his voice slicing the air. "Pretty sure that violates some kind of health code." Other customers stirred uncomfortably, but said nothing. A young waitress behind the counter gave Linda a worried glance, then turned back to her spotless counter. Linda calmly rolled to a nearby table, collecting used coffee mugs. "Can I get you gentlemen menus?" she asked, voice steady, though her muscles tensed. Jack flopped into a booth like he owned the place, legs sprawled wide. "Sure, Wheels, make it snappy." His friends chuckled on cue. As she turned, Jack leaned in, voice lowered but meant to carry. "How'd a chick even get into the Marines? Some diversity handout?" Linda's grip on her wheels tightened, her jaw clenched, but she kept moving. She'd faced worse on foreign soil. Jack wasn't finished. "I served with women. Dead weight, all of them. Women like you are why the military's gone soft." Linda placed the menus on the table without flinching. "Today's special is meatloaf," she said calmly. Jack grabbed her wrist suddenly, hard enough to hurt. The eagle, globe, and anchor ink on her forearm was clear beneath her sleeve. "So you were a jarhead," he scoffed. "Let me guess. Office job, typing reports while real soldiers bled." "Let go of my hand," Linda said, her voice soft but steely. "Or what?" Jack mocked. "You'll roll over my foot?" He released her with a shove. "You're why we lose wars," he muttered. "Too soft, too pampered." Linda took a breath, like she was back on the battlefield. Inhale, hold, exhale. "I'll give you some time to look over the menu." As she turned, Jack thrust his boot in front of her wheel. "I didn't dismiss you, Marine. Show some respect." Linda glided past his foot without pause, maneuvering with ease. "Your server will be with you shortly," she replied. "Wheelchair warriors don't belong out in public," Jack jeered. "If you can't stand up, don't expect the world to slow down for you." The others howled with laughter, cruel and loud. One, heavy-set with a patchy beard, approaching Linda from behind. "We're talking to you, soldier girl," he slurred, grabbing the handles of her wheelchair without permission. Before she could react, he shoved her chair hard. The wheelchair slammed into a table leg, jolting violently. It tipped. Linda crashed to the floor. A full cup of coffee from the adjacent table splashed over her, soaking through her clothes. Her prosthetic leg twisted awkwardly beneath her. The diner froze in collective horror. No one moved, no one helped. Only the cruel sound of Jack and his buddies laughing broke the silence. Linda sucked in a sharp breath, eyes squeezed shut. She lay sprawled on the floor, palms pressed to the cold linoleum. Hot coffee seeped through her shirt, burning against her skin. Her chest tightened beneath the weight of humiliation. For the first time since the explosion in Afghanistan, Linda felt truly exposed. The silence hung heavy in the diner, as though the air itself refused to move. Only the occasional snort from Jack's table dared to pierce the stillness. Her belongings littered the ground. A cracked leather wallet, a folded handkerchief, and a faded photograph that fluttered near her elbow. Its edges were worn soft from years of handling. In the picture, Linda stood tall in her dress blues, surrounded by her Marine unit, before the war, before the loss. With practiced effort, Linda began to move. Every motion was deliberate, precise. Her upper body, hardened by years of carrying what her legs could not, lifted her upright. She reached for her wheelchair, flipping it back onto its wheels with a grunt. No one stepped in to help. A few customers looked away, pretending not to notice. Others muttered low to one another, "Somebody should step in." Not our place. Hard to watch. Linda's face was unreadable, every emotion tucked behind her disciplined mask. Every Marine learns early, never show weakness. She collected her things one by one, the coffee still stinging against her damp clothes. Her Marine Corps jacket, darkened with coffee, clung to her frame. The small emblem stitched over the left breast had faded with time, but was still visible. It had meaning for those who knew. Behind the counter, Melissa, the new waitress barely out of high school, started forward. She held a stack of clean towels, her expression torn between duty and fear. But the manager, Dave, stepped in quickly. He caught her by the elbow. "Don't," he whispered sharply. "They're paying customers. We don't want any problems." "But she works here," Melissa protested softly, bewildered. "Only part-time," Dave muttered. "Those guys spend big when they're happy. Just serve the drinks." Linda made it back to her corner table. She didn't ask for fresh coffee. She didn't wipe her soaked clothes. She sat with rigid posture, one hand resting near her chest, where medals had once hung. Across the room, a young boy stared at her, eyes wide and uncertain. He looked up at his father, a man in a faded Veterans Association jacket, his shoulder covered in desert storm patches. "Dad," the boy whispered, "was she a soldier too? Like you?" The man followed his son's gaze, studying Linda. His expression changed when he saw the emblem on her jacket. Something hardened in his jaw. He looked from Linda to the men still laughing. "Yes, Tommy," he said at last, voice thick. "And by the looks of it, a real one." He stood without another word, phone already out. "Excuse me," he said to his wife, and strode to the door. He was already dialing as he pushed it open. His voice rang clear as he stepped outside. "Hey, it's Lieutenant Crawford. I need to report something to the old unit. You're not going to believe what I just saw." Inside, Linda sat quietly. Her prosthetic hand tugged her frayed sleeve into place. Her eyes locked on the window, where golden light spilled through. The sign outside caught it just right. "Welcome home, Diner of the Brave." Jack's voice rang out again. "Hey, half-soldier, my coffee's cold. Didn't the Marines teach you how to serve?" Linda didn't move. She didn't speak. She didn't need to. The diner door swung open. Exactly 30 minutes after her fall, the low, unmistakable growl of a military Humvee broke through the awkward murmur inside the diner. The massive vehicle, painted desert tan and emblazoned with the Marine Corps emblem, rumbled to a stop directly in front of the entrance. Its tires crunched over the gravel with purposeful aggression. The front door swung open, not rushed, not hesitant, but with deliberate, military precision. 3 Marines entered in perfect step, 2 men and 1 woman, each clad in immaculate dress uniforms that caught and reflected the harsh diner lighting. The lead was a broad-shouldered master sergeant, grey hair buzzed short, moving with a limp and leaning on a polished oak cane. Behind him followed a young Marine pushing an empty wheelchair. Last came a female captain, her uniform heavy with medals and combat ribbons that spoke volumes without a word. They said nothing. They didn't need to. Their sheer presence silenced the room. With focused intent, they walked directly to Linda's corner. The master sergeant halted before her, standing tall despite his injury. He raised his hand in a perfect salute. "Staff Sergeant Rowe," he said. "Apologies for the delay, ma'am." Linda responded instinctively, training clicking into place. She straightened her back, lifted her chin, and returned the salute with sharp precision. Gone was the weariness in her eyes, replaced by the fire of something long buried. "At ease, Master Sergeant Wilson," she said, her voice stronger than anyone in that diner had ever heard. Melissa approached, wringing her hands in her apron. Should I clear the table for you?" she asked nervously. The female captain gave a single nod. 4 coffees, black." Over at Jack's table, no one laughed now. Their smug posturing had vanished. They sat hunched, suddenly interested in anything but the 3 Marines in front of them. Wilson didn't bother to lower his voice. "Lieutenant Crawford called us," he said clearly. "He said one of our own was being disrespected on American soil." The captain's eyes swept across the diner, cool, steady, and unblinking as they landed briefly on Jack and his crew. "The lieutenant also mentioned a physical assault," she said, "on a decorated combat veteran in a wheelchair." Linda shifted slightly, adjusting her leg beneath the table. "It's fine," she murmured. "With respect, Staff Sergeant," Wilson said, his tone ironclad, "it is not fine. No one lays hands on one of ours. Not in the field, not at home." The young Marine behind them stepped forward. "Staff Sergeant Rowe led our squad through Kandahar when everything went to hell," he said, voice unwavering. "She pulled me and 4 others out after an IED tore up our convoy." Linda blinked, recognition flickering. "Corporal Jenkins?" "Still green back then, ma'am," he said, with a small smile. "But I remembered what you drilled into us. Marines move as one. Or not at all." Something began shifting across the diner. An elderly man, wearing a Korean war cap, rose quietly from his booth. At another table, a woman with an Air Force lapel pin stood, straight-backed. 3 men in civilian clothes stood too, National Guard veterans by the patches on their jackets. Lieutenant Crawford returned from outside, eyes hard with purpose. He called out a single word: "Attention!" Nearly half the patrons in the diner rose, standing tall, shoulders back. A wave of silent respect swept the room. Linda stared, stunned. At Jack's table, discomfort became visible panic. The man who had shoved her shrank into his seat. Jack stared blankly at his drink, all arrogance gone. Master Sergeant Wilson turned fully toward them. "The Corps teaches honor," he said evenly. "Teaches us to fight for the ones who can't, to never leave one behind. That's not just battlefield talk, that's life." His words rang without needing volume. They sell the uniform, but they can't sell the soul that comes with it. The captain gently laid a hand on Linda's shoulder. Staff Sergeant Rowe lost her leg pulling 3 Afghan children from a burning Humvee, she said. She earned the Bronze Star for valor. She gave 23 years of her life to this country. Linda shook her head faintly. That life's behind me." "With respect, Staff Sergeant," the captain replied, "the Corps is never behind you. Semper Fidelis isn't just a phrase." Dave, the manager, finally stepped forward. The manager's earlier indifference was gone, replaced by a visible, nervous deference. He cleared his throat and gestured toward the group. "Your meals are on the house today, for all of you." Master Sergeant Wilson met his eyes without blinking. "Marines pay our debts, sir," he replied calmly. "Always have. Always will." The meal that followed was quiet, steady, dignified. Linda sat upright in her wheelchair, framed by the presence of her fellow Marines. Every so often, one would nod or offer a faint smile, something understood only among those who've seen battle. Around them, the diner resumed its usual rhythm, cautiously at first. But now, patrons stopped by their table to murmur thanks, to nod respectfully. Jack and his friends said nothing. They paid in silence, slipping out the door with their eyes cast low. As they passed, Corporal Jenkins called out with an even tone, "Semper Fi, gentlemen." The phrase landed like both a farewell and a warning. As the sun dipped low, long shadows painted the diner's walls. Linda spoke more that evening than she had in months. Memories came, some heavy, some warm, each given air in the presence of those who had earned the right to hear them. She spoke of the mountains in Afghanistan at dawn, of the cold that clung to the skin, of trust built under fire. Master Sergeant Wilson laughed quietly. "Helmand Province, remember that storm? You guided us back, using stars and grit." Linda's eyes twinkled briefly. "Anyone would have done it." The captain's voice cut in gently but firmly. "No, Staff Sergeant, not anyone. That's why you wore those stripes." As closing time neared, the Marines began to rise. The Master Sergeant pulled out a worn business card and placed it on the table. He scribbled a number on the back. "Next time," he said, lowering his voice, "you call us directly. No Marine stands alone. Not ever." 1 week later, the Welcome Home Diner unveiled a new sign. The old weathered wood had been replaced by a gleaming white board, painted in strong lettering. "Diner of the Brave. Every soldier has a place here." Inside, subtle changes told a deeper story. A new wall displayed framed photos of local veterans, names, and service years beneath each one. Linda's usual corner now featured a small brass plaque, reserved for veterans. She still worked her shifts, still folded napkins, and served refills with quiet care. But now her Marine Corps pin gleamed on her collar, and her wheelchair bore a small U.S. flag and the Corps emblem, stitched in red and gold. The booth once claimed by Jack and his crew remained eerily vacant. No one sat there. No one had to say why. Instead, veterans gravitated to Linda's area, drawn by something unspoken. They nodded in quiet respect, but gave her space. Lieutenant Crawford and his family came every Saturday now. Tommy, wide-eyed and earnest, often brought crayon drawings for Linda. Smiling stick figures stood in uniform beside a wheelchair beneath a cheerful sun. "Is this me?" Linda asked one morning, peering at the drawing. Tommy nodded solemnly. Dad says you're a hero. Heroes should smile more. A rare, soft curve touched Linda's lips. Your dad's a wise man, she murmured. He says, Tommy repeated carefully, what you do matters more than what you say. And real strength isn't about having two legs. Out in the lot, a desert tan Humvee became a weekly fixture. Every Thursday at 1800 hours, Wilson, Rodriguez, and Jenkins arrived for dinner. They never brought up that first day again. They didn't have to. They shared coffee, old stories, and long pauses thick with memory. The bond forged in war spoke louder than words. The diner had changed, not just in appearance, but in soul. It had become something rare, a space where civilians and soldiers met on level ground. Veterans who once kept their stories hidden now found quiet camaraderie in that corner booth. Civilians began to notice the quiet strength that had always been among them. Dave, once hesitant, now greeted each veteran with a handshake and a smile. He'd traded his old flannel shirts for pressed button-downs and wore an American flag pin. But the deeper change was in his actions. He'd hired 2 more veterans and launched a monthly dinner for service members. Melissa, the young waitress, had asked, polished version, story ending plus CTA. Melissa had asked Linda to teach her about military rank structure and protocol. She now recognized service insignias, knew which questions were respectful to ask returning soldiers and which ones to leave unspoken. One evening, as Linda's Thursday dinner with her fellow Marines wrapped up, a young man stepped into the diner. He wore a crisp new Army uniform and clutched his cap nervously, clearly a stranger to the town. Linda wheeled over. First deployment? She asked gently. He nodded, relief washing over his face at being seen. Shipping out tomorrow morning, ma'am. Linda gestured to an empty seat. Join us. The coffee's decent, and the company's better. I wouldn't want to intrude on your... You're not intruding, soldier, she interrupted. You're continuing a tradition. As he settled in, Master Sergeant Wilson raised his cup in a silent toast. Across the diner, veterans, some marked by pins, others by posture, lifted their coffee in quiet solidarity. No words were needed. You are seen. You are one of us. You will never stand alone. The town itself had changed. Linda was invited to speak at the local high school. After years of silence, she began to share her story, not just of injury or war, but of purpose, discipline, and the unbreakable bonds forged under fire. The uniform doesn't make you a Marine, she told the students. Standing tall when it would be easier to crumble, that does. Carrying someone's weight when they can't do it alone, that does. And remembering that your actions reflect not just on you, but on everyone who stands beside you. That's what makes you one. Business owners began offering military discounts. The town council funded a veterans memorial. A support group for returning soldiers began to meet weekly. 6 months after that day, a reporter came to write about the diner's transformation. Linda agreed to the interview, but declined to speak about the incident that started it all. Some battles aren't worth remembering, she said quietly. Focus on what came after. And what came after was a community rebuilt by kindness, by courage, and by the choice to stand with the wounded rather than look away. Jack Winters never returned. Word was, he moved after losing his job, his employer citing conduct unbecoming. Linda never asked. She had better things to focus on, like mentoring a young female recruit preparing for basic training, or watching a Vietnam veteran proudly wear his medals in public for the first time in decades. Outside, Montana's evening sun painted golden light across the diner's lot. The old Humvee waited faithfully, a handwritten note taped to the windshield. We always come back for those who never quit. Inside, the diner's windows glowed with warmth, casting light on a quiet but powerful truth. Veterans young and old, faces of courage, stories that mattered. Linda sat tall in her chair, finally home in a world that once tried to push her aside. A small brass plaque on her table caught the light, its message clear. In this place, no one is forgotten. No one stands alone. Because the greatest battles aren't always fought on foreign soil. Sometimes they're fought in small-town diners, where the weapons are words and the victory is dignity. Not everyone who wears a uniform understands honor, but those who stand tall when humiliated, they are the ones worthy of our deepest respect. Call to action. If you believe no one should be left behind, if you believe kindness and dignity still matter, comment, respect below, and subscribe to Echo Tales to help spread stories that lift, honor, and heal.